Good morning, Giants. Welcome to Wake Up with Giants TV. Have you ever wondered how to live a colorful life? Stick around. Good morning, Giants. Welcome to Wake Up with Giants TV. I'm Ryan Morris, and as always, I'm here with your host, Nicholas T. Smith, the author of The Giants and the Smalls. Just a couple of good dudes and our guest today. So,
Good looking dudes.
yeah, really good looking dudes. We are going to get going here in just a second, but if you don't follow us on YouTube, go do that. Subscribe, hit the alert button so you know when we go live every single dang time. Hello.
Morning,
It's
Ryan.
just one directed to me, just thrown out there. Hello.
Yeah.
Good morning to you too.
Facebook user
Facebook
number
user.
10189.
I love you. Yeah, and then currently we're in the middle of or in the midst of two SG groups at the same time, which is awesome. If you want to get going in the next one, SG8, the Ocho. Watch for that because that's going to be amazing.
November 9th, new time for our UK buddies, 11 a.m. Mountain.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
going to be amazing.
That
Hello,
could work.
everybody. Everybody's pouring in here. Oh, hello, cousin.
Lori.
I love you. What's up, Brock? I don't know. It's he does that. It's kind of like Mr. Rogers effect.
It's a beautiful
Well,
morning in the
yeah.
neighborhood, dude.
Yeah,
It's a beautiful day.
with no shoes though.
I don't have shoes on, but I
Just
do
a
have
grounding
pants on.
pad and some love, some smiles.
I think our intro video gets nervous. It starts out playing really fast and then kind of slows down,
Yeah.
eases into it. So lesson for life right there.
Lessons for life. Well, I hope you brought your coffee to today's show because this is going to be a good one. I brought an extra grande.
And your earplugs. You might hear some F words
Yeah.
throughout this show. This might not be PG-13.
Hey, I've got sensitive ears. You better know this.
Nick, will you please introduce our guest?
I will. Yeah, we've got Matt Evans all the way from the UK. What can we say about this guy? He's a supply chain manufacturing genius who worked around the world with some of the biggest companies there are. He's a coach who lets no one off their own BS ever, but he's always smiling and loving when he's doing it. And he was the project manager for the Being Bash in London. That's the Steve Hardison event. He's a drum instructor, composer who just led his drum line to the Youth Band Winners Trophy. He's married to his hot wife, Kate, dad of 3 terrorists, cook in the kitchen, deviant in the bedroom, and now over 2.5 years sober, proving that giving up drinking doesn't mean you suddenly become a good person. You can be sober, potty-mouthed, fun-loving dude, still no alcohol needed. We've got Matt Evans. Welcome to the show.
Morning, boys.
One of the best bios I've ever heard in my life.
I love it, man. It sounds like somebody wrote that for you. No, all done here. I like your hat, man. You want to zoom in on that? It's a beaut.
It's not bad.
Both of you lean in.
I'm gonna do whatever Matt does.
Our
This
vision
could
here.
go down fast if
He's
it
like
starts
a UK version of me. Love it.
I think you're right, man.
I love myself. You look good, Matt.
I always look good. What can I say? I just follow your lead.
Thanks, bro.
Well, let's dive into your journey, man. Let's go into your beginnings, where you felt you were somebody. Maybe you thought you were a certain person in the world. You started living that way, and what that did, what that created in your space. You have some ideas around that?
It's really interesting, bud. So for me, it's kind of been a real weird mix. Like for years, I've always had this kind of, you do a lot of stuff, you do a lot of good stuff. I've always kind of felt there's a giant, but I've always felt like it's a giant in a small. and it's always been a real kind of push situation. You know, I've done some, you know, if I was to go around with the whole, hey, look at me, look what I've done kind of stuff, I could say I've done loads of cool things in my career and in my life, and, you know, always done well. But I'd always had that little thing in my head that I always wondered what I would sound like.
Before we get too big, do your best English American accent. Do you have one?
England? No.
No, that's hard, right? Going the other direction.
Yeah, most ones turn out into like some really weird southern half-assed Texan drawl thing. It's like it's just bad. I wouldn't want to inflict it upon you.
Yeah. Well, keep going, man.
No. Oh, where were we? Yeah, so it's always been kind of a weird thing that he's always felt like, you know, should be more, you know, doing all this cool stuff, and yet never really felt good enough. Always felt small, even though everyone was kind of like, you're doing all this stuff, you're kind of living it, you're there, you're having fun, you're doing all this stuff around the world. Like, you know, it was a real weird, like, mix. And I think most people have probably put it under the realms of depression and anxiety. You know, it really was that.
Did you feel small, like on the inside and outside? Everybody else is seeing this giant in you. They see you doing all these big things, but inside you're like, that's not me. I mean,
yeah, it was kind of fun while I was doing it, and yet I always had this thing like, I should be more, I should be doing more, I should be earning more, I should be doing stuff. You know, it was, everyone else was like, you know, you've got it made, and yet me, my internal kind of little voice was going, nah, not good enough. And it was a real weird thing, because I had, like, you know, all the external validation in the world with people going, hey, you know, you've got this, and, you know, you're doing well, you're doing this, you're doing the other. And yet for me, it was never enough, and it never felt enough. So that for me was a really horrible thing, and that carried on for years.
Yeah, let's go that way a little bit, because you probably had some big judgments about yourself. There's probably some form of numbing that in a way, right? Like trying to avoid it, get away from it, pretend it's not there.
And that for me was where the alcohol came in. You know, it all started as fun and games, and then it became a bit of a coping mechanism and a zoning out and a calming down, and it just kind of one thing led to another, and you know how spirals go, generally downwards. So it just got worse and worse and worse, to the point when it was like, oh, this is bad, you know. And it really was a bad situation. You know, work, kept it all together, doing my job, still doing all that kind of stuff. At home, it just was like, ooh, this isn't working. It just created havoc. So yeah, that
what do you think? Yeah, what do you think was missing though? Like, what brought that to that space where you're thinking, I'm not good enough, my life isn't what I thought it might be, right?
Oh, mate, all sorts. It was literally everywhere I turned, I felt like everything I did wasn't enough. My own, you know, my own systems and mechanisms for saying, you know, what's right, wrong, and what's good and what's bad, they just got so messed up that nothing was good enough. Everything was bad. I wasn't happy with anything at the time. And it just was a chaotic nightmare, basically. I was absolutely living in a frigging hellhole that was self-imposed, because nothing was good enough to me. And it became a point of, no matter what anyone said to me, I just dismissed it.
Yeah.
You know, it was, you know, my own internal view of everything was just not good enough, no matter where I looked. And I mean, Hughes just put on there, was alcohol the problem? Or
I want to pull that back up, actually.
Yeah. And I mean, when I coach people with alcohol issues, you know, the thing I generally say is alcohol's never the problem. It's always what people use as a mechanism, and it never helps the problem. You know,
could be anything, right? Could be alcohol, could be drugs, could be sex. Yeah,
exactly. So it was literally just adding fuel to the fire constantly in a ever decreasing circle. And, you know, alcohol makes you feel absolutely horrible about yourself. It just brings it down and down and down. So yeah, it was horrible.
You know, I think we need to hang here a bit. You know, they're whether it's alcohol, drugs, anything, it doesn't matter. It's the feeling that we're talking about here, who you think you are. It's a state of survival. You know, there's the polyvagal theory. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's the idea of it's called the many ways theory, vagal meaning way or pathway. And so the thought is that when we're in a survival state like depression, the freeze or fawn mode is a depressive state. And it's actually a survival state. And then we have fight or flight that comes at a level above that, where you're actually doing something about it. But when you're in that depressed state, you're below the level of doing. And so you're in that freeze or fawn mode. And it's a survival mechanism that's designed to protect you. But the challenge is we don't see it as that, or we treat it in our society in a way where it's not allowed. You're not supposed to be there. So what do? We numb it out, right? Can you speak to that a little bit, that state?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely that. It's right. You know, internally, it was realizing that, you know, nothing was feeling good, nothing I did was right, and that state just pulls you down. You know, that state was just
your
like
world just goes like this.
Absolutely, you just feel it collapsing in, and it is the worst thing in the world. You know, I got to a point where, you know, I was kind of, like I say, high functioning at work, doing everything in my job, doing what was required, and yet outside of it, I wasn't functioning. And like you say, you just feel the world closing in on you. And then you know, I was getting to a state where it was just drinking more because I felt it closing in and I didn't want to feel it anymore. It just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller.
Do you think there are a lot of successful on the outside people, like professionals, like on the outside world, they're killing it, but then they go home and they walk back into that enclosed bubble and they numb it out because they're not telling anybody about what's going on?
Ever since I came out with all this a couple of years ago, you know, I put a video on Facebook about 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, when I'd kind of hit 6 months sober and said to people about it. And the amount of people that contacted me that said, I completely get it because I'm there. And it was, wow. You know, I even had friends of mine who I didn't, you know, I knew they enjoyed a drink, but I had friends of mine who I would never have put into that kind of bracket.
You'd never know, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, so like you say, there's a lot of people, a lot of guys, a lot of girls all out there who are, you know, coping with things in a bad way and really covering it up. And it's that thing, you know, until you ask the question and say, are you okay, properly, and people can open up about these things and we stop making it such a taboo, then, you know, it's always going to get hidden.
Is that like a to-do, like in Australia, or is that a tattoo or a taboo? Like
taboo. All these to-dos and taboos.
If we're going to do taboos, then let's do tattoo taboos.
Yeah, right. A taboo in Australia too. You're hitting on some things that I think in our work, especially with the 12 journeys, it's all about this internal stuff that goes on that you might not even be aware of. You feel it, but you can't really pinpoint where it all originated from, right? It's like, you know, it's there, but you can't really clearly see what started it all.
Yeah, I mean, as part of like my whole recovery kind of thing, I did so much self-analysis, self-development, self-awareness, CBT, you know, counseling, and all these kind of things. And I got through a lot of stuff. I mean, my CBT counselor, it was hilarious because she said to me, she was like, you've made my job the easiest job in the world. She said, because you've actually dug so deep into everything and understanding who you are.
As far as the thinking of it and everything. Yeah.
I've got an engineering background. So in engineering, you're always going into why.
Right, it was so much like me up until that point. Then all of a sudden he turned into my dad.
He just became like me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. My
You're like me and Nick mixed together.
He's our baby.
That's our baby. I'm sorry, Matt.
Hey, Dad.
Hey, Dad.
If I start saying I've got daddy issues, it's your fault, right?
Right. But you go into that engineering, you can see clearly like why this, why this, why this, why this, but it doesn't change it, right? Like you're overridden by the emotions. Like no matter how much logic you have here, when the chemicals kick in, like I'll tell you this morning, my adrenaline's just going. Like I'm nervous and excited about this week because we've got an event going on. And I've got this level of fear that's present, and my adrenaline's just pumping even right now. And so when that chemical is going, it's like my mind shuts off, right? Doesn't matter what I know.
Yeah. And oh, hey up. Hey, terrorist.
Hi. How are you?
So,
That's our granddaughter, Nick.
Aw.
Aw.
Are you joining
what I
Dad
did here.
today? Yeah.
I told you anything could happen with this.
Hey, man, that's how we do our show. We hope everything happens. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, where were we? Yeah, digging into a lot of stuff. I mean, I went into a whole load of digging in terms of, where a lot of that insecurity came from. And actually, Chloe Bear, can you, I think the technical term is bugger off for a few minutes. So yeah, a lot of the kind of thought process came from insecurities around, validation that I never had. Please, Chloe.
It's funny.
Are we going to have an hour of your tongue? No, we're not.
So what was that like, Matt? Growing like as you grew up, what was home life like? What do you mean by you didn't get the validation?
So, I mean, I didn't have my dad from a really early age. From when I was like 3 or 4, my dad was seriously ill, and I was growing up with just my mum.
Yeah.
And it's really weird. I got to a point where, Clive, listen, can you please stop? I got to a point where it was like, you don't get any validation. My dad died when I was 8. And then, I found myself quite often going, what would my dad think of me?
I'm not laughing about your dad dying, by the way. That was about your daughter.
I know, it's timing gold, isn't it? Serious conversation.
Nick's like,
Nick is insensitive. Why is he laughing about this? Like, no, I'm not that. So
why?
Yeah.
Why, Nick? Why are you so serious?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really interesting because I found that I used to spend a lot of my time kind of thinking, what would he think of me? And because there was nothing positive and nothing negative, it was just a black hole. And therefore,
so your mind just has to make it up.
Yeah, you start making up stories in your head going, well, what if, what would? And I got to a point where a lot of it was, it sounds so cliche, but I had to accept I'll never frigging know. And that was it. It was a point of acceptance, no matter how much everyone else would say to me, you're dead like your dad, he used to help people and he used to do this and he'd be dead proud of you and all that. I just had to go, okay, maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't.
I relate, Matt, because I was adopted.
Yeah.
And so I never knew my mom or my dad.
Yeah.
And so there was no context, no nothing. So it was always who am I? What like, what would they think? Did they love me? Did they not love me? Did they, like all the things. So I can understand that because you're not getting the validation that and and the praise, the love. You have no idea because you're making it all up as your 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old self. And then that sets in as an operating system throughout life. So no wonder why it's 40, 50-year-old people were like,
and this is where I got to. I was just like, when I started going through that kind of evaluation about where it all came from, I mean, my mum saw an ex-boyfriend when I was younger, and he was kind of an abusive twat, let's face it. He was an absolute bellend, like physically and verbally. So, that wasn't the best of times either, let's face facts. But, the biggest thing in it all was this, I didn't know. It was a black hole. And I think most people will say, if you know in a positive or a negative manner, at least you know. And not knowing is horrible. So it's just like, wow. And I got through all that, and it was like, just drop it.
Huh.
It sounds really harsh, but I just had to drop it.
Yeah, so this is the next journey in our journeys, because we go through the grief and the awareness and all that. So you wake up to all this, and then you process it, and you're like, yeah, I know where it came from, all this stuff, and then nothing changes, right? And so there's this thought of acceptance as the next journey here. And acceptance is incredibly powerful. And
Yeah.
you'll see a lot of quotes that say it's the first step in transformation is acceptance.
Yep. Yep.
And what's your understanding of acceptance? What does that mean to you? Because I have a version. I want to hear your version of what that looks like.
So, I mean, it was kind of twofold. For me, that all kind of triggered around the same time. So me stopping drinking, me doing all this work, there was this whole acceptance piece of, you've got to change, you know, who you are and how you're being. Let's get that being word in there. We all love that being word.
Yeah.
So I had to completely.
It's so trendy. Yeah, that being.
I'm on point.
Got to ride that wave.
So that whole thing about who I was, you know, it was completely changing my persona from, you know, being the big brash kind of guy about with all his friends drinking and every excuse to go out with the lads and, you know, all that kind of stuff, along with accepting that, you know, there's stuff that I won't know and I've just got to put it behind me. And there was a little bit, and it sounds really weird, there's a difference between confidence and arrogance, as we all know. And for me, I had to kind of flip a switch a bit that said, you've got to be confident with what you are. You know your stuff, you're good at a lot of stuff. And I actually had to just kind of have a bit of belief in myself and say, you know what you're doing in life. You are actually doing all right with things.
Yeah.
And that was a real weird thing because, you know, in Britain, there's a real issue about being humble and that, you know, you don't shout too much about who you are and what you do. And it's kind of one of these societal things that it's like, yes, I've just cured cancer, but oh, well, it's just one of those things, you know, we get on with it.
No big deal.
Well, okay, that's nice. And it's such a British way, you know.
American too, man. It's not that different.
But, so there was a little bit of me that kind of had to say, all right, stand tall and own it a bit.
Yeah. Okay. Like I want to stay here for a bit. Own it, right? The word honesty means to own it. Whatever's going on, you own it.
Yep.
And there's this thought around acceptance that if I accept it, then I'm resigning to it, that I don't have a say from here. I can't change it from here. It's just who I am. This is who I'll be forever. There's a lot of people that hear acceptance and they think it means that. And there's no resigning to anything. It's just simply, I think your term is a twat waffle up until this point. and from now on, I get to change it, right?
Yeah. Acceptance is just a point. It is just that point in time. You accept that point. What happens from there on is all your choice. You know, you accept that you made the choices up to that point and you own what you did and you own your shit. Absolutely. You know, don't try and pass it off as someone else made these decisions and they forced you and all that. You accept that you got to where you are by a series of choices and it is just that point in time.
Yeah.
But then you can do the same thing moving forward.
You don't have to change anything.
There is a mix up between acceptance and resignment.
Yes. Yeah. Speak to that a little bit. Acceptance and resignment. Matt's preaching right here, man.
God, that's dangerous. I don't do preach.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a good question. This is a great question.
Yeah.
What? Why aren't I naked?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, I thought we were doing this.
No, Nick said this is too PG and it's, you know, pre 9 p.m. so we can't do it.
Pre 9 p.m.
Yeah. If we do wake up with drinks like 10 p.m. then we're okay. We can do it.
Yeah, that's the late night version.
Yeah.
We'll have to have it back on.
Is there something you want to tell me? Yeah, I mean, the whole acceptance to where you are, and if you resign yourself to something,
Yeah.
This is where I sometimes get into a discussion, let's say, with some of the people around like an AA philosophy and the whole Alcoholic Anonymous thing. To kind of what I say, they go to this kind of acceptance, and you resign yourself to being powerless. And I really struggled with that. It's the one
I do too, actually. That identity that I am an alcoholic, right, as a statement.
1 second.
Yep. Offline chat.
I love it.
The wife's just gone home and gone, "Where's the girls?" They're downstairs. No, not
playing in traffic somewhere.
Yeah.
I thought Matt took a moment. Hold on, I got to consult with my spirit guides on this one. He starts talking off screen.
I talk to my 7 to 8 year old self. I'll be right back. Hold on.
Yeah, you're good to check it out. We can keep going. So
1 second.
Yep. So that idea, Ryan, right? Like that I am an alcoholic, right? As a declaration, I wouldn't want to say that that's who I am, right? Maybe as an acceptance statement of I've been that, or you know what I mean?
It's up to a point. Yeah. And that's the thing. I think the one thing that I always had the issue with the AA approach to kind of how I view it is that AA is that thing where it's like, this is who you are. You have an issue with alcohol and you always will. And you kind of have that whole thing about going to meetings and you get this whole kind of identity. And it's like alcohol still rules your life. You still go to meetings every week and you still kind of, have this, my name's Matt and I've got an alcohol problem. And it's like, no, I want to kind of get over this and then move forward. No. I ain't doing that shit. Yeah. So yeah, for me, that's where I really kind of got that difference between acceptance and resigning to it. Yeah. And I was like, right, I accept where I was at the point in time. I had an issue and I needed to sort it, and it then shall not be my label forevermore. It's just what I was at the time. And from now on, I ain't that.
I think of Nemo when they're doing the AA meeting for sharks, right? Maybe was it Nemo? I eat fish. Hi, Bruce.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Fish are friends.
I just found it infuriating. I kind of went for.
Well, others do too, right? Like, yeah.
I just kind of, I went there, and you know what? If it works for people, it works for people. If they're not drinking and they're not living that life and it's not pulling them down, then fair play. But for me, I just couldn't keep going over the same thing, constantly telling me who I was and that I can't change. I've spent 20 years in a career where change is constant. You make changes, you disrupt stuff, anything can change and does change. So to keep having this thing that's like, this is what you are and it never changes. Oh my God, it was against my entire
I've got a thought, so those exercise bands, those big stretch rubber bands, you got one?
Yeah, somewhere.
So if you think about that, like the idea of I've been sober for 2 years, 36 years, whatever it is like anchoring one end of that band to whatever that event was, right? And the other end to you, and it's how far can you stretch before this thing snaps, right? And the idea is to just set down the band. Like here's, and this as a concept, as a construct here is the new you is now no longer that, right? So now it's a practice of becoming the new you. It's not how far can I go from that, because there's a limit to our willpower, right? And so that stretches only so far before we run out and we kind of give back in. And at 30 years, that's a habit at that point. That's a way of being at that point. When you're 30 years sober, it's 30 years since I was that person. I remember forgetting being that person, kind of a thing. Does that make sense? Or you have another variation of that?
But I think the thing is that there's almost a bit of it that if you want to put it to your band analogy,
Yeah.
the more you work that band, the more it creates muscle.
Yeah.
And you get muscle memory. So actually, you're building up that association constantly.
I like that.
It's not just a case of it's there for the time. You keep making it stronger and stronger because you don't see anything else.
Yeah. I like that. So, you know, as an idea, it takes about a year, 60 days to up to a year to create a new habit, right? So willpower is absolutely necessary. How far can I stretch is necessary in the beginning. There's a point though, like you said, you start to build the muscle and it's no longer necessary to stretch so hard because it's easier now, right? And so the brain is designed around supporting that. It'll create the pathways, it'll create the support structures to do that, but it takes practice, right? And a lot of practice takes willpower. And so many of us get just tired and worn out by the willpower. We go back to our old ways, right?
Yeah. And I think one of the things for me, the willpower bit is fundamental. You've got to want to do it to make it stick.
Yeah.
See a lot of people that kind of do it for other people. You know, I think I need to kind of stop drinking because my wife's having a go at me, or because I think it's the right thing to do, and yet they actually still hold a resentment that they want to drink.
Yeah.
So that's always a sticky point when you're working with people. I've worked with people who still see alcohol as a good thing, and it's just something they can't have, and I'm like, ooh, you're going to get into a whole world of pain there.
Yeah.
But the other thing, the one thing that I say helped with willpower is community. You know, there's a whole community out there. You know, I was involved because like I got sober over lockdown. So the UK went into lockdown like about March the 17th or something.
Yeah.
And that's around the time I stopped drinking. And I found a couple of communities online. And actually, you know, I've got a couple of amazing friends out of it. And through those communities is actually how I ended up involved in the whole Steve Hardison stuff, hence the reason I'm here. And you know, it's brilliant. And I often find that, you know, willpower in the first few days and trying to form those habits, having a community around you is absolutely just fundamental to try and get you through it as well. The more community you've got, the more you are probably going to succeed.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Tools of empowerment, right? Things that you use to stay empowered, things to get your mind back when you're struggling. Like, what are some of the things that have worked for you to be able to get your strength back when you're in a down state?
I mean, there's still, where do we go with this? I mean, for me, that there was an awful lot of kind of that playing it forward, you know, and just thinking about what's going to happen. There was a couple of times when, you know, early days I'd stop drinking, and you know, me and the missus would have a bit of a Barney over something stupid, and like most people would call it a fuck it button. You know, you'd be like, oh fuck it, I'm going to have a drink. You know,
lots of those.
Right. Yeah,
everywhere.
We got a bleeper.
It's broken and really delayed.
It's really delayed.
Used to be on point.
Tune into the reruns for the bleep. But yeah, and like you say, it used to be a habit. It used to be I'm annoyed, I'm gonna just have a couple of beers and relax, whatever. And actually, for me, one of the biggest things was, actually, if I do that, what is going to happen? It's going to be a downward spiral. It's going to cause more arguments. It's going to set me back. I'm competitive. I've always been quite competitive. So for me, there was almost this thing of, I want to do this, therefore I shall do this. And I don't want to let me down. I didn't want to let my family down as well. This had become an issue between me and the missus. And, it was that competitive streak, not letting myself down. What would happen if I did do something silly and just said, stuff it? And, like I say, that community as well. I remember one of the biggest times when we had I remember it now, it was about when I was 3 months in. It was right on that cusp of things are going okay, and having one of those moments where it was like, I don't really want to go and get hammered, but we'd had a real Barney, and I called my mate and just said, I am fuming. And he had a chat with me, and we just kind of just calmed myself down. You know, I went for a walk, had a chat, brought it all a little bit down, you know, from being the hothead that I can be at times. And, you know, forever and a day, I will think back to that one conversation as potentially getting me to the point I am now. Because it was that point where I was just so close to just saying, sod this.
Yeah. Kind of a wake-up call, right?
It was that fork in the road. And as Yogi Berra says, you know, take it.
Yeah.
But it really was. I can look back on that time and that phone call as a point that was, I either succeed or fail.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, you know, as you looked forward from that point, so I'm going to do this, right? There's this decision, this cutting off of the old way, and then you're jumping into the new way, and you look out at the unknown, right? There's a lot of uncertainty out there, and you're looking at the available resources to create whatever you have in mind for that unknown, right? So when you were at that point that you have this stepping into a new way of being, how did you face the uncertainty? How did you look at the uncertainty? How did you step into it?
See, this is where there was a bit of a flip, because the previous me would have probably been looking at the negatives.
Yeah.
Whereas I was about 90 days in, you know, I'd got the alcohol out of my system pretty much. And, you know, I was starting to be a lot more realistic and neutral. And it was a case of, I actually saw the positives to it, to say, if I don't go down that route, things will only get better. It wasn't saying things are crap and therefore sod it, so what? It was well, if I don't do that, then you've already seen some improvements in your life. You're going to see more improvements.
Yeah.
So for me, it was that kind of mental dexterity to take it away from where I previously was to what it could be in a more positive manner.
Yeah, who you are when you look forward matters. Because if you come from that old way of being and you look forward, you see the negative. And then if you get into an empowered state and you look forward, you see the positive, you see possibility. And so that matters. So getting into that empowered state is a big deal.
Exactly. And so from like the previous way of being, where I was always thinking not enough, this, that, and the other, to my forward way of being of, okay, things can be better, and, you know, there's a lot to play for.
Yeah.
That one moment was such a kind of all-encompassing flip. It was that teetering point that, you know, went from the seesaw kind of effect. It swung.
Yeah, Rich Litvin says that your goals are where you're coming from, right? But your goals also, if you look at this spectrum, right, you're right in the middle, and there's the spectrum. There's two poles: your old self and your future self. Your old self pulling you back toward it, or your future self pulling you toward it. And at that decision point, that's your opportunity to decide, I'm no longer being pulled by my past. Because that's what it feels like. You try and create from your past. It feels like you're being tugged backward while you're trying to walk forward.
Yeah.
But when you make that decision to be pulled from your future self, did you have a clear vision of who your future self was at that point? Or did you just have a vague kind of vision of that? Or a knowing? Like what did you have to work off of?
It was almost a no clue, but it was knowing that I didn't want to be going back to where I was.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, and so as much as we talk about the unknown in a negative state, I knew that I didn't want to go back to that.
Yeah.
So therefore it was, well, how good could things be? I was already on a roll, you know, I could already kind of see myself changing. I was starting to lose a bit of weight. Things were better at home and all this good stuff. And it was, you've got momentum. Therefore, where you end up going could be anywhere, but take the positive momentum. Don't go back to a negative state.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see it as the path gets clearer as you step. Can you go back? There was that quote on the empowered state, Ryan. Do you have that one? Like, you discover what we are. Yeah. I think when I use that empowered state, that's really where we're at, is really being who's already in there, that's been shadowed by all the stuff you put on it, right? All the thinking that you put on there that said you weren't that.
Mm.
So it's just uncovering it. So it just shows, it empowers it. It lets it run at full power because it's not being blocked by anything. And so the idea of looking forward, right? A lot of times people think, well, when I get clear, then I'll step forward. But a lot of times you don't know clearly. I mean, Ryan and I, when we started this business, we were doing a sales training program, and we went to a sales networking event. Richard Paul Evans was there, and we shifted gears. We went from sales program to getting the book published, and we haven't looked back since. Like, we were going in one direction and another path appeared as we were stepping. And we've had that happen a lot throughout this whole journey, even creating this community.
Yeah.
And so you don't always have the clearest picture, but you do your best to just trust that there's something out there that's better for you.
Yeah. And that was exactly it. It was you're moving in the right direction. You don't know where you're going, but you know it's going to be a better place than where you were.
Yeah.
And you just, like you say, you keep going through it, and what appears, you know.
Yeah.
And I think one of the fun quotes someone said was, you know, if you're driving 500 miles, your headlights don't show you all 500 miles. You know the 200 yards in front of you.
Yeah.
And that was kind of it. It was kind of, okay, well, this 200 yards in front of me, I'm doing what I do, and then what's the rest of it? Who knows?
Yeah.
I know rough direction.
Well, we're predicting anyway, right? Always there's this somewhat of a gamble of what's going to happen next. And we're playing it out in our mind of what we think is going to happen next. And then we act or don't act based on what we think it's going to play out as.
My professional supply chain background has a wonderful quote. What is a forecast? And it's either lucky or wrong. You know,
either lucky or wrong. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
I always say, if you can't be good, be lucky.
And
I'm lucky a lot.
You know, you can come up with all these ideas of, I'm going to do this, that, and the other, and how it plays out. It's like, hey, just go in a direction and hope that it works out.
Yeah. And well, coming from a positive space, you have more hope for the future. Someone said that there's no hope in the past. Like the past is done. That's why hope is meant for the future, because it's an exciting energy about what's coming next. It's anticipatory, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting that once you're on that kind of, it is that thing. It's like a flywheel. Once you start gaining that momentum, you go with it, you build it, you get more and more and more. You know, I wouldn't have ever thought that I'd been up to some of the fun stuff that I've been up to, you know, the last 2-3 years. I would never have been doing it if, you know, everything hadn't happened. I'd not stopped drinking and all that kind of stuff, you know. So it has been like, just like I say, it's been a flywheel of things just accumulating and just getting better.
So how do you surrender the way? Not your vision of your future self, but how you're moving forward. Like, how do you surrender? What is your method for that? That's funny. Put a system to surrender, right? That probably doesn't work in the real world.
No.
You engineers.
Yeah.
That's probably hard for you guys.
Yeah. I mean, from an engineering standpoint, there's this thing about budget and fix it. You know, you've got an idea of how it'll work, and then you just budget and fix it till it does. But
budget fix it. That'll be the new surrender, right?
But yeah, I mean, for me, I've always said about things being directionally correct. You know, I've never been hell-bent set on things should be X way.
Yeah.
And, you know, if it's going well, you just ride it. You know, for me, it's not about surrendering and just saying, well, hey, shit happens, but it is about saying, you're going on the right path, and if there's a few bumps in the road, well, how do you fix it and just get over them?
Yeah.
And some of those bumps you don't have to fix either. You know, some people get obsessed with every little detail, and I'm not a detailed person. If it works out and it's kind of fit for purpose and it all works, great. You know, you don't have to be to every little detail. You'll drive yourself mad.
The word satisficing, right? Herbert Simon, the Nobel Prize winner, satisficing is sufficient for the task and satisfies the need, right? It's good enough, basically, is the phrase.
Yeah.
And it'll outperform optimization every time. And people with expectation right? There's an expectation that things will go a certain way, but if you come from a more confident expectation, is you're hopeful that it will come out the way that you've anticipated, but
Yeah.
you're still flexible enough that if it doesn't, you'll pivot. But people with a rigid expectation, when it doesn't go their way, it really hits their ego and identity, like
Yeah.
who they think they are. As you've been moving forward into that pathway of just whatever happens, how have you kept flexibility around your identity about who you are? Is that a weird question? I've got weirder ones, I think.
He's got a lot of weird questions.
So it's weird. My identity has changed.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
So, my identity used to be around this kind of big drink culture, always out and about, and different
That's who
groups.
you were, right? People would say that's Matt, and you would say that's Matt, right?
And it would be party hard and fall asleep by 10:30 at night. That would have been quite often. That's Matt. Rugby playing, out in the pub, and just all that kind of stuff was very much a part of my identity.
Yeah.
And I kind of tried to live up to it a bit. Whereas now I'm still as mad as ever and still kind of, do all the silly things I used to do, just minus the drink, minus the sleep at 10:30. But yeah, I don't think I've lost any of me effectively.
Yeah.
But I've gained an awful lot. For me, I've not lost anything. I've just gained a lot.
If there's a me that's at the core, and then there's the identity that's added on top of that, right? You shed this, it's like putting on a new set of clothes, right? The me underneath has always been, there's this consistency of something beyond the identity, right?
Yeah.
Something that's aware of it all. And then we put on this pair of clothes that says, I'm the drinker, I'm in bed by this time, whatever, and then you shed that, you put on a new pair of clothes, and it's all of a sudden you're now that, right?
Yeah.
But there's a part of you that's beyond that even. Do you agree with that, or do you have a different version?
No, you're right. It is beyond that, in the fact that now I just kind of do what I do, and I don't, everything that I am doing now, I don't see it as my identity. I just see it as things that I'm doing.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm enjoying what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I don't then make it so that I have to stick to it. It doesn't have to be, I do that and that is who I am. It's just I'm me, and that is something that I do as well.
Yeah.
Were you worried, Matt, like as you're going through this shift or this change and just growing, were you worried about like the judgments of others? Like, were you worried like, hey, am I going to have the acceptance when I have the people that stick around me, or am I going to still have the same friends? Am I going to have the family support, whatever it is, as you were going through that?
Yeah, at first there was. I mean, obviously, my family and, some of my friends are, hey, dearie.
Hey, dearie. Fiona's like our mom. She like keeps us all in line, but in a fun way.
Wild children. Sorry, Fiona.
Yeah.
We're some wild childs.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a will I lose people, but as part of that growth, there was also well, if they only like me for that, well, screw them. If they don't like me for who I am, not for the identity that I used to put on, are they someone that you want in your life even? And I'm genuinely lucky. I have not lost any of my friends through what I've done. If anything, I've just gained more. I deal with more people now. I'm in different circles, but I've still kept all my old friends. So, I am genuinely lucky. I know there are people out there who, have to lose friends, have to drop relationships because of, cultures and, avoiding certain situations. But, I've been out with my mates. We've been out on the town. We've been to all the places that we used to go before, and it's brilliant. I've enjoyed it, and we've just kind of carried on as what we used to do.
I want to take a stab at this too. Is when you have that concern about how it affects others, it's not like you don't care. It's not that, but it's a level of internal acceptance that you don't have because you are so concerned about what other people think. And when you have a high level of acceptance of yourself, you're actually able to more accept other people exactly as they are too, even if it's totally different from you.
Yeah.
There's some people that are just a pain in the ass. I don't want them in my space, right?
That and that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're just not good for my energetically. We don't work, right? But I can accept that's where they are.
There's always those people around.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, but yeah, what I did find was that, like I say, you know, some of the people who said to me about, you know, fair play to you for doing what you've done, and, you know, coming out with saying that you've had a problem with it.
Yeah.
You know, some of those are the guys that actually I then still went out drinking with. And when I say drinking, like alcohol-free beer drinking.
Yeah.
And actually, it was really interesting that they used to kind of sit and chat to me whilst they were having a beer, saying, "How do you stop drinking?" You know, it was kind of mad.
Yeah, isn't that like, you put "how do you stop" and put anything on the end of that is often an indication that it feels out of reach for that person. That if they only knew a simple path to get it done, they would get it done. Like, how do you do this? And the world is full of how-tos, right? But do you want to? Like, if I told you that information, do you want to use that? Are you going to actually implement what we talk about here?
The thing that I always say is that, you know what, I love having those conversations with people, you know, no matter what. You know, I've had it like when I've been out and about, just kind of sitting, if I've been in like a bar working or something, and someone's seen an alcohol-free beer and they've kind of started talking to me. Having those conversations is great, because if someone is interested in it and want to kind of think that there's something in it for them, I'll always help them.
Yeah.
And having those conversations is a way to just at least get them thinking about, do you really want to do this, and understanding what it takes.
Yeah, man, I'm guilty of being the guy that wants to know all the how to without taking action around it. You know, in the past, I was that. There are still moments of it, right, where I want the information.
This magic formula.
Yeah, and then it's like, yeah, well, I have the thing now, and it's just collecting dust on my shelf, right? But you know, I love to collect information. I love to learn things, but there is a level of wanting to shift that has to occur in the person for that to be useful. It's not that the tool's faulty, it's their using it, right?
The thing that I say to people, the hardest thing is you've got to do the work, and that work, generally that work is painful.
Right.
You have to go through an element that is going to really be, why are you doing things to a certain point that then means that you realize you need to make a change so much. You know, if you've hit that point, there's probably going to be something behind it that means that there's a deeper issue. And those things are the ones that really get people. If you start, you know, having further conversations with them, and they start opening up about, you know, why they're drinking so much, there's always a level of discomfort in it.
Yeah.
It's not just a, oh, hey ho, just stop drinking. No.
Oh, hey ho.
Yeah.
It's easy. I just flipped a switch, right?
Yeah.
There's a level of why too, right? If your why is because of other people, you're only going to do it so long. And if it's an internal why and something you're connected to of why it's meaningful for you, then you're more likely to stick with it. You know,
I mean, it's like anything. You've got to be properly invested in it. If you're not invested in it yourself and you're just doing it as a sidebar, just, you know, one of the things that's quite common with kind of giving up drinking is that people do it just to keep other people quiet. I'll admit I did it before, right? I had a stint of 3 months where I gave up drinking just to shut other people up. I had people saying, you're drinking a lot. So, you know, I was like, right, fine. I'll go completely teetotal, and just for 3 months I'll give up. And I went completely teetotal for 3 months just to shut people up. And it wasn't a why for me. Yeah. Therefore, at the end of it, I was like, right, hey, screw you all. I've proven a point. Here we go.
I'm glad you went with deuces.
Yeah.
versus
and,
the alternative, the middle.
and it wasn't for me, you know. It
Yeah.
was never for me. You know, I always knew at the end of 90 days,
Well, that's a challenge, right? I'll take on a challenge, but it's short-lived. Like I'll do something courageous, you know.
I won. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I will win. I will win.
I will win.
Beat
right.
you. I will do the challenge, and then I will just ride off to the Sunset Bar and get hammered. Yep, that was it. So, yeah, and so unless people are properly invested in it,
yeah,
they ain't doing it.
Okay, the word interest, right? Interest means in between, and committed. Committed means to do. And a lot of people are interested. They're in between. So a lot of our suffering happens in the land of interested.
Yep.
But as soon as we make a decision and get committed, then, you know, then we really start to see a transformation in our lives. But before then, we're suffering, we're interested, but we're not willing to take the actions that would actually get us to where we want to be in our lives. Yeah. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds really weird, but I was always interested in not drinking. I knew it wasn't doing me any good.
Yeah.
You know, I'm generally a pretty intelligent guy, according to most, no matter what the face looks like. And, you know, I could even see it wasn't doing me any good. I put a ton of weight on, you know, I just was slobby and never, like I say, there was all these negatives. I knew it wasn't doing me any good. Therefore, I was interested in not drinking.
Yeah.
But I wasn't committed to do what I needed to do to actually stop it and keep it stopped.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to be painful, you know, and that was the thing. You know, I used to start thinking about stuff and then, don't know, not yet, nothing yet. So it was one of those where the interest was always there, but the commitment wasn't. And it was only when things just hit a certain shitstorm level that it was right, enough's enough. And I had to be committed. It just got to a point where it was like, right, you have got to sort your life out, boy. And that then was like, right, use it or lose it. And it was my life at that point, because I had got to the point where I was suicidal.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was on the verge of losing my family and, you know, wife, kids. I was literally at that point where it was choose. And so, you know, that commitment had to be there.
I have a thought here. Well, let's play with this for a sec. You know, it's the idea that we numb out in the interested. We numb out in that space of, yeah, I would like to do that, but we haven't quite made the commitment. So sometimes numbing out softens the commitment. It's like, well, I don't have to act because I'm numbed out, right? So in a way,
you start thinking about becoming committed, and then it's like, no, that's too hard. So I just go back to interested.
Yeah.
The more that you drink, the more you get less interested.
the less desire you have to take action, right?
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
It is a self-defeating cycle that, you know, a lot of people fall into.
Yeah. Well, I see in the journey as we recap this, you know, this went by way too fast. That there's this knowing of who you've been, and that's all it is who you've been. And when you wake up to that, you might have some judgments and some grief and sadness and all this stuff that kind of shuts you down, right? Where you get into a depressed state. And then you look at the future from that and you get a lot of anxiety or fear about the future. And so you're stuck in the survival state. It's only when you move to acceptance that shuts off. Mm-hmm. And acceptance isn't resigning. It's just simply when you got to that point, it was, I was that person. I'm no longer going to be that person. I don't have to go anything to reconcile that person necessarily. Some people do, but in your case, you didn't. And then from there, it's moving into a space of gratitude and getting your power back, and then looking forward into the unknown, getting your vision back, seeing all the resources that are available to you that you couldn't see from before, right? Mm-hmm. And then surrendering how you get there and just taking care of you, like growing you in as many ways as you can. And your whole reason for doing it is because in you, there's some reason, there's some mattering that happens that you say, this is important because, and it's different for every person. I have my things that matter, my value, my curiosity, and giving without obligation or duty, right? Like those are my things that drive me. And somebody else will have some values that are totally different from that. Is there anything else you'd want to share today around your journey that might be helpful to those that are watching?
I think, what it's a huge one for guys, generally, is that there's a whole pride element, and there's such a thing about dropping that ego and actually kind of letting go of that facade of what you think you have to be.
Yeah.
And obviously the illustrious Miss Ross, who is on the call, she is the absolute queen of doing all this stuff. Those guys who are out there that think that, they can't let go of that mask, and that they can't be that kind of softer kind of element. It's massive. The amount of people that drive themselves into the ground because they are, keeping these walls up about being this big, strong, macho, egotistical kind of blokey. Yeah. It's mad.
They're speaking from the outfit that they wear that day, right? Like they're speaking from this.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost one of those where, especially in like business type cultures,
yeah,
you get so much where it's this ingrained, what's the word I'm looking for? It's an ingrained culture of how guys think they have to be.
Huh.
They kind of carry it forward and carry it outside and into their home life. And it's just this societal kind of norm. And actually, the one thing that I have always said is that if there's guys out there who are struggling, you have to be able to kind of drop that and talk from a place that is far more vulnerable and far more honest. The amount of conversations that you have with people that that they are talking absolute bollocks because it's what they think they have to say rather than what's actually coming from inside them.
Okay. Yeah, the vulnerability, it comes from the word wound, right? So like a lot of people speak from their scars and the story they have around their scars, but not from the wound. And when you're talking about vulnerable, it's getting into the wound a bit, right? It's opening that back up. And a lot of guys have a hard time with that. I'm sure there's women too that are in the same boat.
It's really interesting because I've been involved in a couple of groups for like people who want to change their alcohol behaviors. So I used to help run a big group that had like 5,000, 6,000 people in. And, I run my own little group that's got like 150 people in now with my friend. And both of those groups have had exactly the same demographic split. They've had about 85, 90% female and, the remaining male. And there's still so far to go with guys actually opening up about this a little bit. And coming from a place where I've come from, I do find it easier to see through a lot of this. So if people are talking to me going, I haven't got a problem. Okay. There's some people where you go, there's every flag coming out of you. As soon I've had some people where within about 30 seconds of saying, I don't drink anymore, they start having to justify why they drink and how much they drink. Like within 30 seconds, it's like, oh, I don't have a drink problem, but I do like this and I do have that. And it's like, I think you're trying to persuade me a bit too hard here. That there is this whole thing with guys about dropping that ego because it is a one-way ticket. No matter how fast it is, it's a very slow one-way ticket generally, but it's one way. People.
So for me, some of that was like, it wasn't drinking because I've never drank. I'm just not a drinker. But for me, goes back to the acceptance and the love. It was that I felt like I had to perform at a certain level and do a certain amount of things to be worthy of the love of my father. That he would love me and he would tell stories about my successes to others because he was proud of me. So then in my 7, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old brain, I started creating that story that I had to win championships or have a lot of money or business success or the amount of
Yeah.
kids, the cars, the everything to be able to be worthy of his love. Which once I discovered that that wasn't true at all, and learned to love myself, it was
Yeah.
easier to drop that story, you know. But I can also relate to a guy in society that, you know, you're not performing, or you have a problem, or you know, you have a weakness. You know, people don't love to admit that,
No.
and so
No.
that's I can relate to that.
Man, this has gone by way fast. We're an hour and 5 minutes in, and I just want to hear any closing remarks from both of you. Just any other thoughts you have around this topic that you might think would be relevant. Ryan, you want to go?
I just you know, to Matt's a funny guy, and he has a ton of personality, and but along with that, a lot of experience through what he's gone through. This might not be your exact journey, but look at it as though, like, you know, what you're going through. Um, I saw a comment on I think it was the Ultimate Coach Facebook group that Hugh had put on there about the Book of Being, and Steve Hardison asked you to read about the Book of Being, and you know, you might, it's not your story. Steve Hardison's story is not your story. Your story is your story. Look at your story, see what story you've been telling yourself and that you've lived through, and then see where to go from there. If you have a hard time, reach out to a Matt Evans, reach out to a Nick Smith, reach out to a Ryan Morris, reach out to a Judy Thurston. Uh, there's a million people on here, Fiona Ross, that are amazing, that have been through a journey that's probably similar or that they could relate to, and then they can help you see something a little bit different and see you for the giant that you are until you can see it for yourself. And so I'm grateful because I'm sitting here listening to Matt and loving his personality because it's just like me, minus the engineering part. But the looks, everything. I mean, just dead sexy, amazing. Yeah. And it's funny as I'll get out. But I'm just sitting here thinking about my journey and my story, what I've been telling myself, and still looking at those areas. I haven't arrived, not even close. My whole family could tell you that all the stories, right? Like the things. Nick could talk to you for days about my areas of where I'm playing small. But guess what? That's what I want. I want people to point those out and talk to me about it and love, and it's gives me a little bit of bubble guts. But as you start seeing those things, you can then use your experience, your personality, who you are, and discover who you are and what you can do, which is limitless, and keep growing and create the life that you want. Is really
Yeah.
what it's about.
And after Ryan takes me out of the chokehold after telling him these things, then we get back to life and keep going, right?
You know what though? Like that's the thing too. Is like find. I said this on our SG group the last week. Is that find somebody that you can talk to about some of your things that will tell you brutally honest,
Yeah.
but give them permission so you don't punch them in the face because that sometimes it might be something that's hard to hear.
With
But
love.
yeah,
With
but
love. Yeah.
it's with love. Yeah, they want
Yeah.
you to grow and they can see what maybe you can't see. So there you go.
Yeah. Thank you,
I
man.
probably
Matt,
didn't answer any of your
no,
question, but yeah.
that was excellent, I think. Matt, do you have any final thoughts?
Oh, I have many thoughts. You're talking to a guy with ADHD. It's just
Yeah.
Yes.
dream of
So
them.
we could go off on a different show. Welcome
Yeah.
to Wake Up with Giants. I'm Nick Smith. New episode.
No,
ADHD and
Yeah.
you.
yeah. I mean, it's been great chatting with you guys. I mean, to be fair, we've not had to cut the stream off due to any serious
Not
lapse
yet.
of profanity. So, I mean, this it's been tough. No, I just love being with you guys. I mean, and like I say, the more that these kind of conversations happen, the more it's accepted, and the more that it's kind of open for guys to hear that you don't have to be a certain way, or you can be who you are. I mean, one of the things that you've just touched on, the ultimate coach stuff, I mean, everyone knows who Steve is, I presume. I did
find out Steve Hardison.
Yeah, he's a pretty cool guy. One of the things I really found, actually, that I'd been through kind of a year, 18 months of all this transition. And then a friend of mine, Amanda Coles, she's a coach in the UK. She messaged me and said, you have to read this book. And it was almost like she set it up for Read It About You, because she was like, you will identify with this. And one of the things that I took from that was, Steve is just him. He doesn't pretend to be anyone else. And that book, as much as people say about changing lives and stuff, and it kind of led me to where I am here with you guys and everything else, it was just another step in it. That book did give me that you can be you unashamedly. It was a real game changer. I remember it was like, I finished reading the book just like 2 days before my son was born, and it really did hit home that I suddenly went, shit, you can be you. You can actually be you rather than who you think everyone else wants you to be. And that was something, and for people to kind of realize that, and you don't have to kind of be this other person, that was game changing. It kind of kicked me up a level. I got to a certain point, it was all good, not drinking, life's better, yada yada yada, and then bang, it was like, oh, and by the way, you can actually be you. That was a game change. So the one thing for most people is, don't be ashamed to be you.
And there's always more in you. It's not like you have to do this, right? There is always more that you can do if you choose to do it. There's no requirement to do it. Like, that's the beauty of this world, is you could be satisfied right where you're at and call that good, and that's your place to rest, and you're done, right? But there is more. And so for a lot of people, what that shows, like you said, I was good where I was, and this took me up a notch. Like, it showed me something I hadn't seen yet. But not out of pressure or obligation. You didn't have to do anything. It was like, oh, I want that, right?
And that was the thing. Like I say, it wasn't something I was looking for. It's something that I was kind of given, and someone said, read it. And I just took from it that one, I took from it a lot of things, obviously, but that one thing for me was just like, boom. Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, good. This is a great show. For those that are watching, we love the comments. Like, you guys keep this show entertaining with the comments and the engagement. I mean, there's nothing like it. I just absolutely enjoy reading them and being able to talk about them. You guys make this what it is. The Tribe of Giants, you guys are all engaging in there pretty actively. And that's another place where people can get community, like you talk about, support. Really just come in and be who you are and start sharing from there. If you haven't read the book, The Giants and the Smalls, or The Ultimate Coach yet, go grab a copy. Go to giantsandsmalls.com. You'll see that at the bottom of the screen, and get your copy today. But the biggest thing is you're exactly where you are. It's an obvious statement, right? And where you are is where you're going to launch from, whatever that looks like. And so embrace it and love where you are. You're not resigning to it. You're just recognizing, this is where I'm at. This is what I've got to work with. And from there, you can create anything that you can imagine. And so that's your opportunity. Is the X is where you are, not where you're going. So it's where you're coming from, not where you're going to. And so that's why we always do that symbol of the X, the X stone. I don't have it on me right now, but the idea is just launch from where you are. It's good enough. Let's go. And so we appreciate you being on the show. Thanks for your comments, for your engagement. We'll be back next week with another awesome guest. I think we've got Steve Chandler, author of 30 books, bestseller, mentee of Steve Hardison, and just a powerful human. One of my first
Grandfather of coaching.
Yeah.
His new book is
Godfather.
brilliant.
Is it?
They don't call him
Yeah.
the grandfather of coaching. That'd be
Yeah,
hilarious.
his
Grandfather.
But he's the
like,
godfather.
And it's just like every single page you're like, ah.
Steve Chandler is, when it comes to wisdom, I've never met anybody like him. Funny, dry humor. My kids would always say, it sounds like Garfield, like the cartoon character. Hi, I'm Steve Chandler. You'll hear it next week when you come on, but he's just a beautiful human, and we look forward to having him on. So, Matt, thank you for being on with us. You guys make it a great day. We will see you in the next episode.
See you later, guys.